Good afternoon, Rhody Nation. Back another week, another episode of Mark's Remarks here on WRIU 90.3 FM. Mark Radigan here. We're back with a blast from the past, some might say, in terms of teams. We haven't had Rhody Men's Golf on the program for a while. Shout out to Aiden O'Donovan being the first friend of the show coming on last semester. So I thought, I'm trying to get more teams involved on the show, so why not branch out into some of the new spring sports with the spring season about to be heading underway in the middle of March. So joining us in the studio today is a grad student from the Rhode Island Golf team, Bryson Richards. Bryson, how you doing today?
I'm good, Mark. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Of course. Golf is obviously one of my biggest passions outside of URI. Golf is probably my main sport, so I always love learning about golf at URI and talking about it. So getting the opportunity to have you come on the show was something I wasn't going to pass up on. So I was very excited for this. To sort of just like jump right into it, we were talking a little bit before we hopped on, just like going to college in New England, playing golf can present a number of different challenges. But for you, being a successful college golfer, coming from Vermont must have been very interesting. So, just if you can get us started, I want to talk about just how you kind of got into golf, especially being from a bit of an inhospitable golf state, some might say, considering how far up north Vermont can be. But just sort of, what were some of the things that got you into golf?
Yeah, my dad picked up the game out of college, kind of fell in love with it, and that love kind of bit my grandfather too. And of course, when I was born, my grandparents babysat me, so they were retired, so they would go to the golf course every day, and my grandpa, he would bring me, and I'd go and hit balls with him every once in a while. It started out with me just sitting in a baby carriage. He would push me around, and I would just watch him hit. And then as I got older, he would let me get out of the carriage and hit a ball down the fairway and maybe hit a couple putts into the hole. And I kind of just fell in love with the game that way. I started playing tournaments at the age of 5, and obviously I've been playing ever since. But like you mentioned, Vermont really isn't the ideal state to kind of grow up and playing golf. It's not something that people would clarify it as a hotbed for junior golfers. So it was tough. You only get 5 or 6 months of the year really to play, if that. Our courses back home close on Halloween. So it was tough. I played other sports growing up too to kind of pass the time in the winter, but golf was always that one love and one dream for me. So
that's awesome. Similar to me, like I remember getting into golf at a super young age. Probably wouldn't say I was as competitive as you were at 5 years old, but you seem like whenever you talk to someone about getting into golf, it's always the same sort of story about you get into it super young and you're hooked for life. As any golfer will tell you, is that once you fall in love, that's it. You're stuck for better or for worse. You're stuck. And so, just like as you were getting older, you're playing in a lot of these competitive tournaments. You're really seeing yourself excel and competing against guys that are much older than you. Just as you started to get older, what was that thought process like of like, all right, like this is something I want to stick with, and this is something that I feel like could be big in terms of, okay, maybe I can play this at a school. Maybe I can play this for high school. Maybe I can actually play it in college. What were those maybe thoughts as you were growing up, or some of those conversations you were having with coaches or your parents?
Yeah, so I would say around 8th, 9th grade is kind of when I kind of shifted my focus fully to golf and wanting to play it. Play it in college. I grew up with a couple guys at my course who were older than me and like 4 or 5 years older. So by the time that I was really getting into the game and wanting to play in college, they were committing to schools, getting ready to go play. So I kind of had them to look up to. But yeah, I started seeing, college coaches' attention around freshman year. Thought it was pretty cool. I would just, tee it up at a random tournament in New England, and, X amount of coaches would be out there watching. So yeah, I thought that was cool. But yeah, freshman year is kind of when I started getting those coaches' attention. And then I committed here end of my junior year. So it was a pretty quick process as far as like deciding that I really want want to do this, college and then eventually professionally, to actually committing to the school. So,
were there a lot of other schools involved in the recruitment process? Like, were you getting looked at by a number of schools like down south, or was it mainly New England schools?
It was, I would say, mainly New England. There were a couple of southern schools. It was tough, like we talked about earlier, just being from Vermont. It kind of required me to get on a plane a lot to go down and get in front of, some of the southern coaches, and that really wasn't feasible. So I had, a select opportunity maybe twice, 3 times a year that I would get in front of those guys. So I kind of figured out probably sophomore or junior year that New England was probably going to be the place. I just hadn't had enough exposure in front of the southern coaches for them to really want to pull the trigger on an offer. But I had decided, I had it narrowed down to a few schools, obviously UConn being one. And there were a couple other schools in the South that expressed interest, but I think I was a little bit more comfortable in New England. I was just comfortable with that style of golf, knew how to play here. So I was pretty content with coming here.
And so in terms of just your scores, and as that sort of process goes, because you have to be at a very competitive level to make that jump from high school to college, but as you were sort of figuring out your game throughout high school and decided, like, all right, I want to move on to the college game, what were your scores sort of looking like in high school? Like, did you see them like gradually sort of drop down, or was there a moment where, like, during like a summer season where something clicked and all of a sudden you were able to really start honing in on some low scores?
Yeah, it's there are so many progressions in the game of golf. It's like when you're younger, breaking 80 for the first time, and then you break 70 for the first time. I remember the first time I broke 70 in the tournament. I kind of just had to prove myself that I could do it. So yeah, I had started to play well, kind of going into my junior year. Low 70s, high 60s, just proving that I could do it in tournaments, because you can do it at home at your home course all the time. But to be able to do that in front of, not only in the tournament, but in front of college coaches as well, was important. So yeah, I would say around sophomore, junior year that I kind of started to show that, and, coaches started to show some interest in it. They say good golf takes care of everything, and that was the case. You win a tournament here or there, and they love to see that. But more importantly, they want to see that you're a good person too. They don't want a head case that is going to come in and not represent the school in a good way. So there are more factors to getting into school. But good golf is probably right at the top of the list.
And so then coming down from Vermont, going to URI, obviously the weather is a little bit more hospitable, particularly during the spring and summer months. But just as you kind of started to find your feet at URI, do you feel that your, experience playing golf in Vermont and like understanding like that New England landscape helped you get acclimated quicker as a freshman coming here?
Yeah, I for sure. It is a little bit of different style of golf. Like, it's definitely more windy. But it was a big thing for me just being comfortable. I was like I mentioned earlier, I was comfortable in New England, playing New England golf. I struggled my first event here, big time, and coach kind of threatened to take me out of the lineup. Not in a malicious way, just was like, I want to give you some time to get your feet wet and get used to everything that's going on. Decided kind of last minute to keep me in, and I went out and won my second event here as a freshman. So that kind of jump started the career a little bit to make me a little bit more comfortable, just to prove to myself that I could do it. I knew that I could do it back home, but it's a different thing to be able to do it, when you get to college.
And so that feeling of first tournament, not really playing well, like, and obviously golf is a very mental game, and one that you're on a knife edge for the most part, where it's like if you really let your mental state slip, the golf game completely falls apart. So then coming out of a tournament where your coach is like, hey, I want to give you the time to figure yourself out, take a moment to get yourself acclimated to where you are, and then going and winning your second tournament. I mean, that must have been really good for your own mental fortitude. I mean, just what were the feelings like afterward, like kind of being like, whoa, all right, like that, welcome to college for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I mean, obviously I go into every tournament expecting to do well, expecting to win. I would say that at that point in time in my career, I wasn't really. I was just trying to solidify myself in the lineup. And we had an assistant coach at the time, Dawson Jones, who was with us, and he walked with me for all 54 holes of that tournament. I think that was huge because I obviously knew that I had the talent to play well, but as far as, I think from junior golf to college golf, the way you think and the way you go about things is very different because you have 4 other guys relying on you to play well. So you can't always be aggressive in certain moments that you want to be, because if you don't pull it off, you're hurting not just yourself but the other guys. So having him there walk 54 holes with me, and he had a great career here. He'd won a couple times. Was getting ready to turn professional himself, so he was a high level thinker. And having him out there to just kind of calm me down, especially in the final round, I'm 2 or 3 shots back, and it's hard in that scenario, especially at 18 years old, to not think about result and wanting to win. And oftentimes, if you get too far ahead of yourself, you get bad results because of it. But having him there talking me through all 18 holes was huge for me.
And so then tell me about just what the state of the team was like when you joined freshman year. I know that we were talking about a little while ago just how young that this current team is now with a lot of freshmen. But you were kind of talking about how there was a lot more upperclassmen, a lot of guys that you could look up to, guys that have been in this sort of situation before. I mean, just tell me, what was the situation that you were getting yourself into when you first came here?
Yeah, I would say we went from, in the past couple of years, we've gone from, I would say the oldest team in the A10 to now the youngest. So when I got here, we had a 5th-year senior, 2 or 3 seniors, and then juniors, and I was a freshman. There was a gap in my class, so there wasn't any sophomores. So it was basically me and then upperclassmen. So for me, that was honestly, looking back on it, probably a blessing, because I found out in a hurry how to do all the right things, and I was the only freshman, so they were on me all the time about making sure I was doing the right stuff. So I think having them helped me for sure, and I was lucky enough too to have obviously Brandon Galish, who's our assistant coach now, transferred in from Wake the year before. Jordan Bryson came in from a D3 school in Seattle, so he was an older guy. He's playing pro golf. Obviously, Brandon's our assistant now. Chris Rancourt, who transferred to Louisville's 5th year, but was here all 4 years with me, or 3 years with me, and he's now playing pro golf. So I had 3 guys that were high level golfers, really great minds that I had looked up to right away.
And so then, just as time is going on, you're getting through your first season. You already have your first win in the first 2 events, so now you're like, all right, you know what? I've got my feet wet. Now I'm comfortable. A little less to prove, maybe. Did you feel like as that season was going on, because you were the only freshman and just being an underclassman, do you feel that, was there any point that you had to kind of show up and really show your stuff, or was it just all right, you know what, these guys respect me and I know what I'm capable of, so I can be a little bit more comfortable? No,
I knew my place, and they were good about always giving me a hard time, reminding me that I'm still a freshman. So I really did. I played every tournament like I had something to prove, and even though I had won, I mean, in college golf, if you have one bad week, your roster spot isn't safe. I mean, you're right back in qualifying, and if you go through a rough stretch, you go from winning a tournament to maybe not even being in the lineup. So you can't really get complacent in that matter. And I didn't. I didn't have a great 2 events after that, but then COVID hit. So then kind of everything kind of got put into a spiral.
Yeah, so kind of just that would give me my next sort of topic is just COVID, because it's a reoccurring theme in a lot of my shows. We talk about the impacts of COVID because everybody felt it differently, whether it was COVID was during their recruitment process, or they were already an athlete here and they were kind of going through it. You were already an athlete here, but you were still young in your Kingston career. Just, I mean, how did COVID impact you guys and the team as a whole? Because obviously golf is one of those sports where initially during COVID you couldn't really play because everyone was locked down, everyone was inside. But it was one of the first sports that I feel like got everything back going, because it's individual, because you're outside. You have natural social distancing in the game. It's ingrained into the game. So, I mean, just what was COVID like for you as a college golfer?
Yeah, it was tough because I think it was our spring break freshman year. We always take a trip down south as a team over spring break and play an event. And we were down there, and it was 2 or 3 days into our spring break trip. And we kind of found out about what COVID was. We weren't really sure how serious it was, so we were still down there practicing and playing. Of course, I think we were in North Carolina at the time. We find out a couple days before our first tournament that pretty much the season was going to shut down. So we actually got rushed home from North Carolina because we weren't sure if borders in the state were going to close, because we had driven down there. So I remember driving back to campus, and when we got back, it was like a 13-hour drive. And we got back, campus was like a ghost town. And, of course, it was the winter time, or it was like early spring, like March, I guess. And, of course, I had to go back to Vermont, and of course, the golf season wasn't even close to starting there. So it was kind of weird. We go from, like, prepping to having a spring season my freshman year to pretty much getting shut down for good. And I don't think golf really opened back up until April, I guess May or June of that summer. So it was like 3 or 4 months where we weren't sure if we were going to be able to play in tournaments that summer. Like, the game was kind of, weren't as sharp. We weren't going to be as sharp at all. So yeah, it was a tough time for sure. And it's crazy to look back on it now. It's like 3-4 years ago. So
like, how did you deal with the fact of not being able to play? I mean, like, most of the times when you hear about a lot of really competitive college guys, they're coming from states where, like, it's warm, and say you're sent home, you can still kind of hone your game at home, like, the courses are open and so on. But for you, like, golf season's not starting till May practically.
Right.
So you're sitting at home kind of twiddling your thumbs, not really being able to do very much. So, I mean, just, like, how did that impact you? I mean, like, mentally, that must have taken a toll.
Yeah, it was tough because I think Vermont was one of the last states, I think, too, to kind of open it up for play. So it was weird, like, May, June of that time period. Some of the state golf associations down south, I think, were already playing, and so it's like you're sitting at home, kind of waiting for your opportunity. Like, hey, like, winter tournament's coming out, and then you look down south, and they're playing right away. So it was definitely just a weird time. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have a spot to hit in my house, and I live kind of in the middle of nowhere, so I can hit balls outside. So that was really, really all I did. I mean, my home course wasn't open, so I was hitting golf balls at home with my brother and my dad, just kind of waiting for tournaments to open up, and hoping it was soon. Because, like I said, looking at guys down south, they were playing. So.
And so, did they end up pushing the season back at all, or was that spring season just completely washed out?
I want to say we had only played it depended on what schools were allowing, what events, because our schedule was completely different than what it was supposed to be. So we had gone to New York, I think, once for like a one-day event, and then our whole team got COVID, so we were in quarantine for 2 weeks. And then basically at that time when we got out of quarantine, we're getting ready to fly to Florida for A10. So we had played one or two one-day events, and that was it. And then it was conference championship. So the season shrunk from 7-8 weeks to like a 3-week period, and that was it. We had barely touched the club, anything. So it was tough.
And so then, how did your game, I guess, maintain itself during that time? Did you see any significant change after that sort of COVID shutdown when you started to get back, like, into the fall, like when stuff started to get back to a shred of normalcy, let's say? Did you see your game, like, any parts of the game fall off, or was there any rust that you had to kick off?
It was definitely nowhere near as sharp. I remember getting to A10s, and it's really when you want to be your best. And for a lot of us, it was our first time even hitting balls in like 2.5 weeks. And so like the first couple of rounds, you're kind of just hanging on, like seeing if you can scrape around and put a number together. And I would say by the final round that everyone kind of had gotten a little bit more comfortable, but that whole time off, our games were nowhere near where they should have been. It was tough because, like I said, you want to be ready to go for an A10 championship, and when you're coming right out of quarantine to go play, like, it's just not fun, So to answer your question, no, there was a big drop off from where we should have been to where we actually were.
And so then, finally coming out of that COVID era, you're back. It's 2021. Stuff's sort of normal. Sports are back up and running with the limited to no COVID regulations at that point. And now you're a sophomore. Were more underclassmen brought in during this sort of process to maybe balance out the age in a way?
Yeah, we had two more freshmen come in, which was nice. Unfortunately, we had two seniors that were in the lineup that, when COVID hit, that they were done. They had no more eligibility after that, so their opportunity to play was gone, which was tough for them. But then we got the two freshmen in, and it was just kind of a fresh start. The team looked a little bit different. We were younger for sure. We still had 3 seniors at the time, but like I said, it was just a fresh start, which was nice.
And so then, with that fresh start, obviously getting the game back in sharp, just what was that those initial tournaments like for you coming out of COVID, getting your feet back on the ground and then getting a club back in your hand? Obviously, like, you gotta probably take a couple tournaments to get back to like your full firing form, but just as you sort of got into a groove, what was that feeling like for you?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, it's sometimes, it feels like it's like riding a bike. It eventually it comes back. So it was, after A10s, I guess was in April, and then by May, all the tournaments were back open. So it was back to normal pretty quickly. We practiced for a week, and then we were at an event, and then all of us play a pretty heavy summer schedule. So by the time that we had left school in May, it was back to normal at that point, just playing tournaments all through the summer and then getting ready for next fall.
And so then, as you've gone through your first 2 years, what were your scores starting to look like? Did you see any considerable progress as you had made the jump from like high school coaches and private coaches to then working with college drilled coaches who have been molding recruits, molding guys who have gone on to play pro careers for years? Like, did you start to see a considerable change in your game?
I would say that for sure. I would say that my best golf wasn't a lot better than it was at the junior, but I was just far more consistent. I never really had the blow-up round anymore where I'd go out and shoot, 80. I was pretty steady in what I was doing, and I think that's really the most important thing is the difference in junior golf to college golf is just being able to manage your, like, how good can your bad be? And my bad in junior golf wasn't very good, and then in college I just had my bad rounds were just a little bit better, so my scores consistently just got a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better throughout my time. So
that's funny. Every golfer listening at home right now is probably thinking, "Man, this kid's blow up days is shooting an 80. It's all I dream of is wanting to shoot an 80." But no, it's fascinating to just see the progression of someone's game, because it's like, I know in my personal game, like, over time you start to see the scores drop as you start to focus in on certain things. But when you're not consistently working with a coach, that obviously takes a lot more time. But for someone who's already exceptionally competitive, then working with a very experienced coach that knows how to get the best out of certain aspects of the game, that must be just like something that a lot of people just can't comprehend, like having someone that knows the answers to all of those sort of golf questions that regular guys have just been plagued with for their entire lives.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier, I was lucky to have some really good players in front of me that I could pick their brains and stuff like that. But that was the biggest change I needed to make from junior golf to college, was that I was super competitive, as you mentioned, but my mind and course management skills, all that stuff that the casual golfer doesn't really think about, needed to get so much better. I needed to learn how to limit mistakes and realize that sometimes taking bogey really isn't the worst option. So that's where I've made a complete 180 from even my freshman year to now. It's just learning how to play the game the right way, knowing when I can maybe take a chance and go make birdie or an eagle or something like that, or maybe to throttle back and just say 4 here is a great score. So that's the little stuff, the little tiny stuff that the average golfer really doesn't think about, but matters a lot when it comes to even taking a shot off your round each time. Like that makes a huge difference over the course of 3 rounds. If you can take at least a half a shot off, I mean, you're picking up over a shot over the course of a tournament. You take 1 shot off. 3 shots from the first round to the end is sometimes the difference in winning and losing, and it really doesn't take much just to knock that shot off. It might be maybe I have an issue with my putting. I'm 3-putting all the time. All right, how do I limit my 3 putts? Or I'm having 1 or 2 really bad tee shots where I have to take a drop. How do I get a little bit better off the tee to maybe save a half a shot from round to round? So that's the little stuff that, being in a college program, having good players in front of you, that stuff that you learn is the most valuable for sure.
I feel like those are a lot of the same questions that casual golfers like myself will always ask ourselves before a round, but then once you actually get into it, it kind of clicks off, and you don't think about it anymore. You're like, all right, you're going each shot at a time. You're not really thinking of the bigger picture. And I know I am 100% guilty of that, because I know the second I start a round, I'm like, parred the first hole, parred the second hole. I'm like, all right, this is round of my life. We're getting into it. But I feel like that it's not something that casual golfers think of very often, but something that you always hear pros or you always hear guys that play competitively are always saying, like, hey, this is stuff you want to think about. If you want to get to that upper echelon of competitive golf, like, these are the things you need to understand. These are the things you need to think about. And so, I mean, do you have, like, friends of yours that maybe, like, aren't playing college golf and stuff that, like, come to you looking for advice on, like, how to, maybe not necessarily how to specifically tweak something with their swing or, like, something physical about their game, but, like, maybe, like, how to deal with the mental ramifications that come with playing golf?
Yeah, and for sure. And it's funny, really looking back on it, like, if you told your friends in high school you were playing golf, you're like, whatever. But now you look at it now, and, like, all my buddies who really just didn't like the game in high school are now playing, which is kind of funny. So they reach out all the time about stuff. And it's hard to explain to the golfer the weekend golfer about that kind of stuff. Like, they don't really realize, and it's hard when you don't play every single day. Like, they don't realize the work that we put in, like, on our minds and the stuff that we do in practice to play better in tournaments. Like, for example, we're talking about, knocking shots off your score. Like, of course, we have yardage books now with numbers and all that stuff written down, but we have, slopes on the green where we mark where to hit it, where not to hit it. And we also, talk a lot about, where should we miss, like, where our misses are, and we have to figure out, too, like, where our strengths are. So, like, we'll come to a par 5 that maybe we can't get into, and, we keep track of our stats and all that stuff, and, I'll look at my book and just can draw off prior knowledge. Like, I'm not great from 125 to 130 yards, but I'm really good from 50 to 60 yards. So, like, that's stuff to think about. Like, if I'm not going for a par 5, I'm laying up to a number that I'm comfortable with. And so, that's the little stuff that, casual golfers, they just don't understand or will think about. Like, that little stuff matters, because if you're horrible from 125 yards, why are you hitting it laying up to 125 yards? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, we're constantly thinking about little stuff like that to save shots out there.
And so, in playing in a lot of these competitive tournaments, and the next thing I want to kind of get into is what we were talking about before, is the inability to truly play tournaments at home. But when you're playing in a lot of these competitive tournaments against big schools down south, and you're playing against guys that are, say, SEC guys or ACC guys, like, do you ever see yourself, like, picking up on subtle nuances from those guys, or, like, how, like, you watching them and seeing how they think or how their process is? Because, I mean, from my understanding, like, you're pretty much, like, yeah, you're competing with them, but you're on the course with them. You're seeing everything that they're doing, just like they're seeing everything you're doing. So, I mean, have you ever picked up any nuances from other guys or your peers?
For sure, and I think if you talk to any good golfer, they have an extremely open mind, and it doesn't matter if the player's better than them or worse than them. We always kind of want to learn something, because it's so mental. At the end of the day, the game is so mental. So if we can pick up anything, I mean, I'll look at, it's less mechanics based. Like, everyone's kind of got their own swing and it's groove now, and we just work on, the little things that we know we have to work on. But I'll pick up, like, how long a player takes over the ball, like their routine, like how they read putts. Like, a big thing now is, like, aim point and tour read, and, like, different ways to read greens as opposed to just using your eyes. So, like, that's little stuff that we'll pick on. Like, there was a time last year where we were playing Cutter Creek, which is Elon and East Carolina's event, and we had played with the host school one day, and obviously the grass is a little bit down there, a little bit different down there. So they're reading greens completely different than I'm reading. I'm using my eyes, trying to just see breaks, see the grain. They're all using their feet because the grain, you can't really see it as well as opposed to, like, in the Northeast. So it's, like, little stuff like that. Like, all right, maybe I need to learn the way that they're reading greens, so next time I go down there, I can, maybe make a couple more putts. So it's just little stuff like that. I don't think anyone really picks up on the mechanics and their golf swing. It's more of just, like, the routine, how a player handles himself. Like, what are their emotions like when they hit a bad shot? Like, little stuff like that.
And so then, kind of moving into that same sort of thing where it's like you're seeing these different experiences and you're seeing these subtle nuances that players have down south. Given that the program doesn't really host that many home events because of just the weather in Rhode Island. I mean, the weather's beautiful when it actually gets warm, but because of just New England's inability to have consistent weather, it's difficult to host tournaments around here. So, Do you feel like that traveling so much, particularly down south to go play in these tournaments, enhances your game in a way because you've now been able to play at so many different styles of courses?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everyone's excited to get out of the cold weather. But yeah, I mean, I think, again, a lot of us who, are here, and schools everywhere have played all over the country prior to even being here. So it's not a huge difference. But it's just, we're just excited to go down south and play in the good weather, so.
And have you played in any notable tournaments in New England or in Rhode Island that university has been able to actually host, or have almost all of them throughout your career just been away or you've had to travel for?
Yeah, we haven't had a home event since I've been here. I know we talked about it pre-show, but a lot of it, we always host it in the spring, and it's kind of a sketchy time in Rhode Island to host an event, just as far as the weather goes. And all the New England schools, like, they correlate. Nobody wants to host an event on the same weekend. You don't want to be fighting for teams to come and play your event, because you want the best teams you can get at each event. So, like, just the scheduling for us hasn't worked out as far as having a tournament what's in the spring and different from another New England school, or, I mean, just the weather. Where we play Point Judith, like, the course isn't even open until April, like middle April anyway, and where it doesn't matter wherever we'd host, most of the private clubs around here don't open until the end of April. So there hasn't been a reason for us to kind of push to host one, at least to my understanding. I mean, those decisions are a little past my pay grade per se. But that, to my understanding, that's kind of the reason. Why would we force something up here when we can just go down south with some better weather and play some good teams down there?
So then, as you've kind of risen up the ranks of this program, and now being probably the most experienced guy on the team right now, do you feel like that has any bearing on how guys are brought in, or how you guys are able to recruit some of the talent that you bring in, knowing that it's not one of the schools where, like, hey, we can host tournaments here at our university, like the same pitch that like a Wake Forest would give. Obviously, Wake Forest has the pedigree of, like, having guys like Will Zalatoris and everything else, but it's one of the schools like that have their own courses on campus where you're able to host events like that. Do you feel that it's a bit of a different sort of pitch when you're trying to get younger guys to come in, when you say, hey, look, we don't have our own course, or we don't host our own tournaments? So the majority of the tournaments we have, we're traveling at least a state away to go compete in.
Yeah, I think that, being in that position at one time, I think as a junior golfer, like, they're really just looking to see if the program's producing good players. We're lucky enough to have Point Judith as our home course. We just don't host an event there. So I wouldn't say that that's a huge deal for a junior golfer to think of. They just want to see that, we're playing a good schedule, which we do, and that the program's producing good players, because that says something about the coaches, and that the schedule's made out. Like, if you're producing good players all the time, like, there's something to say about the way that the school's doing things.
And so then now, as you've gotten to this point where it's like we sort of talked about earlier, it's reversed from when you first got here. You were the only freshman in a team of majority upperclassmen, and now you are the only grad student on a team of majority underclassmen made up of mainly sophomores and freshmen. How has the experience of being with this team, I guess, changed in a way where it's like, all right, as a freshman, you're looking up to all of these guys, and, like, having these older guys that have been through it before, you can rely on them to sort of show you the way. Now you're on the other end of that. What's that like for you? It's
been great. I've loved that experience. Passing down the knowledge that I've learned from the guys ahead of me, and I know, as you mentioned, I know that they look up to me, and so it's cool to be out in a practice round or a course that I've played before and be like, hey, like, instead of doing this, like, maybe we should think about doing this. And they also get to see the way that I act on the golf course or around, and coaches. It goes past just stuff on the golf course. So that's been cool for me to just kind of. I love the game. I love everything about it. So being able to pass down any knowledge that I know has worked for me to them is cool, and to see them learn that, maybe put their own twist on it, or follow exactly what I'm saying, and for it to work out for them is a great experience.
Yeah, that must feel good when it's like, hey, look, like, I've played this green at least 10 times now. I know how it's going to break. And then they're like, all right, fine, I'll listen to you. And then it works. That must be an amazing feeling.
Yeah, and it's cool. And it's, if they take, my advice and, they play well because of it, it's cool. And I also want to give them the keys to being, successful, what that entails, because I've been lucky enough to play, with some really good players over my time, and to pull things that the things that I pulled from them, to be able to pass that down to them too. They're just growing their knowledge completely, because they're getting my intake on it. They're getting what I got from them, so they're just getting, like, if they're open-minded and they're willing to it, they can get so much knowledge from me and from Coach Gillis as well. So,
and so, like, we've seen it with Coach Gillis, having been a player recently and then moving into the coaching role. I mean, before I was curious to see if that was something that you would also be interested in doing, but before we kind of jump into that, just like, what's been, obviously you have a strong relationship with him, but now that he is on the other side of it and he's coaching you to try and help you improve, just how has your relationship in a way strengthened as a result of that, and how has that impacted your overall game? It's
completely shifted from when you're teammates. You just go about things completely different. Now that, he's somebody that he's my coach. I mean, that's what we go from being, best friends throughout our college careers, and then now you treat him as a coach, and you treat him as such. I mean, that's what he's someone you look up to. But our relationship really, especially on the golf course, is built around trust. I know that he's seen me play enough golf to know that when we're out on the course, he's walking with me, and we're in a stressful part of a tournament, and he's giving me advice. I know what he's giving me is 100% accurate. I trust what he's saying, and we've just done that so many times throughout our undergrad years playing, and so now him being in that coaching position where I know that what he's saying to me is working, and I know that he knows my game well enough to know that that's the best outcome for me. So having that other voice out there has been really beneficial for me.
And so is that a sort of career path that would interest you? Obviously, this is your last year of eligibility with the squad, and golf is a very competitive sport to go professional in. Obviously, like, for guys coming out of college, like, if you're not at the upper echelon of the NCAAs, like going through the Korn Ferry Tour or doing stuff with the DP World Tour, doing stuff with Live Golf, like all of these other sort of qualifying avenues, there's a lot of options to pick, but it's still, you're one in a million for some of those guys that are trying to go through that avenue. So, I mean, are there things involving golf that you want to move into once you graduate, like coaching or playing, something like that?
To be completely honest, I haven't thought much about that because, my goal has always been to play professional golf. Seeing Coach Gillis in that role has kind of introduced a new path for me. Like, I think that I could see myself doing that down the road. But right now, it's kind of all systems go towards playing professional golf. I mean, that's been my goal. That's what I work for, and that's why I came back for a fifth year, to kind of just give myself another year to prepare and hone in some certain skills that I feel like I need to work on before I, get out there in the pro ranks.
And so a few years ago, that question would have a pretty simple answer of like, oh, I want to make it onto the PGA Tour. But now, given the current state of the golf world today, there's so many different avenues that players can take, and there's so many different ways that players can kind of get their feet wet in the professional field. I mean, we saw Live grow over the past few years, and now you're seeing a lot more of a focus on trying to get younger guys to qualify. I mean, this past year, you're seeing guys that were at like in the bottom of the four for each team getting dropped out, and then now you've got these big qualifying tournaments that they have ahead of each season. So that adds a whole new dimension of, or a whole new set of opportunities for college guys. So I mean, to some golfers this may seem like a silly question, but is playing on the PGA Tour the number one utmost obvious goal, or are there other things in the professional golf sphere, like maybe playing on the Live Tour, or maybe doing stuff on the European Tour, the DP World Tour? Are there other avenues that you would also like to explore?
I think everybody's goal in our position right now is to play professional golf, and I think the amateur game has done a great job in the past couple of years giving amateurs the opportunity to play. I mean, there are some college events now where if you win as an individual, like you get a spot into a PGA Tour event. They have the PGA Tour U rankings for all the seniors. Like the number one player there automatically gets a PGA Tour card. So they're still trying to feed players onto the PGA Tour. Like I think that's everybody's goal. But I mean, just in the past couple weeks, like Caleb Surratt from Tennessee, he gets an offer from LIV and goes to play. And I just think professional golf right now from the outside world looks really messy. Who knows if PGA Tour and LIV are going to combine? I mean, I have no idea what's going to happen with that. But regardless of what side you're on, PGA Tour or LIV, there are so many opportunities for people going to play professional golf now. Like there's so many Monday qualifiers to get in the Korn Ferry Tour events, to get on the PGA Tour. There's obviously the same alleyways that there has been for the PGA Tour, but now all of a sudden LIV Golf is hosting Monday qualifiers and things like that. So I would say that it's tougher to get out there now, but there's more opportunity, if that makes any sense. Like the whole introduction of LIV and obviously DP World Tour being a huge thing now, PGA Tour Canada and PGA Tour Latin America combining into the Americas Tour. Like there's so much stuff happening out there that based on how you're playing, there's so many directions you can go once you get out there. So,
do you have any sort of idea of maybe a tour that you'd want to like try and investigate becoming a part of once you graduate? Like, I mean, obviously, like the easiest one would probably be trying to do some Monday qualifiers for PGA Tour events or Korn Ferry Tour events in New England and so on. But would you ever consider trying to get your feet wet in maybe a LIV qualifier or a DP World Tour qualifier?
Yeah, so I don't know how that whole process works. I don't know who gets the invite for LIV and stuff like that. But my plan is I'll be moving down south in September, probably out to Arizona, because there's a lot of opportunity out there. So I'll go to Arizona and prep for Q School, try and get status out on Korn Ferry and work my way up through that way. And I think for me, that's the most feasible option right now. Who knows what's going to develop with LIV and what their opportunities are. I personally, I don't even know I don't know what their criteria is to get into their qualifiers, but all that stuff is set in stone with the PGA Tour, so it's easier to plan for that. And I think it's kind of just up in the air as far as what the opportunities are with LIV are. It's just too new for me to base my plan around that. Like I have no idea, but I know what it takes to get on the PGA Tour, so that's what I'm going to be working towards.
Yeah, I think I remember looking up the LIV, I guess, qualification requirements that they ask for. Because, I mean, I was curious about it because when you're looking at it, you're seeing a lot of these younger guys coming out of college, and not many of them are getting instantly, like, offered massive contracts. Like, a lot of them are having to go through these qualifiers. And they're very specific. Offhand, I don't remember exactly what it is, but there were a number of, like, you needed to have won particular tournaments to even be in the running for, like, the LIV qualification sort of setup and everything. But, I mean, it seems like in that regard that they're really trying to establish themselves as, like, a competitive tour in that way, where it's like, all right, if you want to be a part of this and you're not, like, already established on the PGA Tour, we want you to be competitive. We're not going to have just any sort of slouch come on and play because of the guaranteed money and everything and the no cuts and stuff. So you want to at least have a continuously competitive product. But, I mean, it's fascinating to see now that we're living in this time where college guys are going to be able to make that conscious decision of, okay, PGA Tour is an option. It's what I've been dreaming of my entire life. But now we've got other tours that may offer a little bit more money, and it may be a little bit easier to get onto those tours. And so have you had any conversations with your coaches in that sort of regard of, like, all right, what they think that could be a good avenue for you, considering the guys that they've seen make the jump up to professional or their own experiences working with, like, tournaments and qualifiers and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our conversations from this point to the end of the year will kind of be based on what my path is going to be, because I know they want to set me up for success. Again, the thing with LIV is, like, they're really plucking your top players right now. Like Caleb Surratt was, I think he was, at the time was a number one amateur in the world, maybe top 3. Like those are the guys that they're shooting for right now. So I think for everybody else, they were kind of still looking at that path to the PGA Tour. And the thing with LIV is like if you get hot and you go win a U.S. Amateur, or you go win a high-level event like that, then maybe that opportunity presents itself. But I don't foresee anybody else being able to really get that opportunity unless something happens like with their qualifiers. And, we talked about it, but I think their qualifiers are like, I don't even know if they have a schedule. Like they kind of just pop up like every once in a while. So, again, our conversations with Coach Burke and Coach Gillis have been strictly what is the best path for me to get on the PGA Tour, and then the other stuff with LIV will come with some very, very high level golf.
All right, and so then kind of just as we're starting to wrap up, I want to get more of a feel for like what you've truly experienced in playing for URI because of just how interesting a scenario being on a golf team in New England can be. I mean, just like tell me, what would probably be your favorite tournament that you've played in as a member of the Rhode Island Rams, just throughout? Like, if you can think of ones that jump out, whether it was a particular course that you were able to play, or if it was an exceptionally strong field that you were able to compete and remain competitive in, just what was maybe like your favorite one, or like a top 3 of tournaments you've played in?
Yeah, number 1 for sure has got to be A10 Championship. It's the one that everyone's kind of got circled on the calendar as a program that you really want to win. We've been lucky enough to play in some really good tournaments since I've been here. I know VCU hosts a great event. It was at your country club, Virginia. We played in Penn State's event last year, which was a cool one, a program with a lot of history. And then I guess this is 4. I'm breaking the rules a little bit. But Elon in East Carolina hosts a cool one at Cutter Creek in North Carolina with a great field as well. So those are really the powerhouse events that we've played in so far.
And so then outside of playing at URI as just another guy who's addicted to the game, I mean, just what are some courses that you've been able to play, just like bucket list stuff? Have you been able to get down south and play any crazy courses like a Sawgrass or like a Kiowa, like courses like that?
I had the game of golf has given me so much, and I've got to experience a lot that if I would never to get into the game, just wouldn't have happened. Golf aside, just the places that I've got to travel with my family. But I had the opportunity to play Seminole in Florida, where they had I forget what TaylorMade match it was. It was like during COVID or whatever, and I think they had the Walker Cup there since then, and I think they hosted a college event last year. So that was really the first time that people had seen that course on TV, because it's very, 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 very private, secluded. They don't really want anybody to know what's going on. So I had a really cool opportunity to play there. I played in Doral. I've played Prairie Dunes in Kansas, which has hosted a Big 10 championship or Big 12 championship. So I've been to Pinehurst.
Pinehurst is so nice.
Awesome. So I've had some cool experiences. Being at some pretty historic places, and I think I can't reveal too much, but the guys are going to a pretty cool place next year too. So
nice.
that'll be exciting.
Oh, that's gonna be fun. That's gonna be fun to hear about. I will be calling Aiden in the next couple months to be hearing about that one. But I mean, just like, how'd you shoot at Seminole? I mean, like you can't just throw in that you played at Seminole and not tell me how you scored.
I think I was 15 at the time, 16. I played with the head professional Bob Ford, who used to be the starter at the U.S. Open, would call out the names on the first tee. I want to say I shot 78, 79. By far, not even the hardest golf course I had ever played. We played it from all the way back. It was windy. I shot, I think, 78 or 79, and I felt like I played awesome. And it was just, I was more wrapped up in just the experience of being there. I wasn't really worried about how I played. But that golf course is by far the hardest I think I've ever played, and it's not close.
God, can you imagine at 15 years old shooting a 79 at Seminole? Oh my God, I could only dream of that. And I mean, maybe just one more. Now that we're kind of on this topic, I mean, what's one course that you dream of playing? I mean, because it seems like that you're set on the path that could take you to play some of the best courses in the world. And I mean, I know I've got my bucket list of courses that I want to play. I think probably right now, one that stands out to me that I want to play more than anything is Whistling Straits in Wisconsin. That, for some reason, when I was applying to schools, we were looking about flying out there to go look at some schools out in the Midwest, and my dad and I were like, we're taking 2 days, we're going to play Whistling Straits. And something about that course is so fascinating to me that it's one that I want to play. But I mean, just like, give me, off the top of your head right now, what's the one course you want to play more than anything?
Augusta National for the Masters.
You know what?
It's not even close. There are so many incredible golf courses that they play out there on tour. They play in I think the U.S. Open's at Pinehurst next year. The Masters, though, is kind of one of those things you're 10, 11, 12 years old on the practice green back home, and you're like, all right, I have to get up and down to win the Masters. Like, that's just something you dream of doing. So for me, it's Augusta National, and only in the Masters. Like, it would be incredible to play it for fun, but to play it in the Masters would be super special.
That would be awesome. That would be amazing. Now I'm thinking about it. That would be incredible. My dad and I have been talking about for years about trying to play one course in all 50 states, and we want to have it be like PGA Tour, like level courses, like tour courses that have hosted big events. Like Whistling Straits would have been one of those for Wisconsin, and we always talk about it. We're like, that's the pinnacle. We'll save Georgia for last, and if by the grace of God we're able to make that happen, that would be incredible. But I have to agree, Augusta's 100% up there. It's just, you can't beat it. It's heaven. It's golf paradise, and that's when you ask a golfer what's heaven like, you describe Augusta National.
For sure.
The amen corner. You think of all of that. But that's kind of about all the time we've got today. Bryson, thank you. That is the first time in a while I've gotten to talk about golf like that in a really long time. So that was great. I'm loving everything. I'm loving everything I'm hearing.
Yeah, it was great, Mark. Thanks for having me on. We had a good time. So.
Of course, and I mean, I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this team performs. Like we talked about, a very young team in the Atlantic 10, but a lot of guys that can really hold their own. I was looking at a bunch of scores. You're seeing a lot of average scores in the low 70s, high 60s. That's what you want to see. Especially with young guys that are only going to improve, those are the type of scores you got to see. So hats off to the coaches, hats off to Coach Gillis and the rest of them who are really taking the bull by the horns and getting a good recruiting class in. So I'm excited to see how you guys are able to fare in the next couple weeks, and hopefully it gets a little bit warmer so you guys can actually get out on the grass, get out on the greens in Rhode Island. Because I mean, Rhode Island, when it's warm, the golf there isn't much better unless you're obviously going down south. But in New England, when it comes to it, Rhode Island is just picturesque. So hoping you guys are able to get out on the course soon and really make you or I proud in a sport that not a lot of people maybe necessarily pay attention to.
Yeah, we're excited. We got our freshmen got their feet wet in the spring or in the fall, so we're ready to get going. Try to bring an A10 championship back to Kingston. So
fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for listening in this week. Gonna try and find some new guests. Gonna try and get some coaches into the rotation now. We had a lot of players. Now I've had some grad students, but I want to try and get some coaches in. So a lot of stuff up my sleeve. Obviously, pay attention to the socials for any updates. Marks Remarks Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And we'll be back next week with a new guest. So see y'all then.